Hi, everyone. Welcome to Breaking the Silence, a podcast produced by Angels Protection Inc., where we amplify the voices that challenge inequity, advance healing, and reimagine leadership in spaces where influence shapes lives. I'm your host, Makaila Davis, founder and chairwoman of Angels Protection Inc. And today's episode is a part of our Men Leading in Academia series, where we spotlight men whose leadership extends beyond titles. Men who are reshaping academic institutions, public policy, and workforce systems through scholarship, service, and courage. The series exists because representation in academia matters, because who leads determines who has access, and because equity-centered leadership is essential in a world where innovation too often outspaces justice. And today's guest embodies that truth. So, Dr. Kendrick B. Davis is a scholar, policy leader, and systems architect whose work bridges higher education, federal policy, STEM innovation, and workforce development, all through an unwavering commitment to educational equity. He's a professor of research at the University of Southern California Rossier School of Education and the founding co-director of the USC STEM Center, where he leads research, strategy, and partnerships focused on advancing equitable STEM pathways from K through 12 through higher education and into the workforce. Dr. Davis is also the creator and faculty advisor of the USC Critical Policy Collective, a space dedicated to supporting students and engaging education policy through public scholarship, civic leadership, and applied research, ensuring that future leaders are equipped not only to study systems, but to change them. His career reflects a rare and powerful blend of academia and government service. Dr. Davis previously served in the United States Senate as a Congressional Science and Engineering Fellow through the American Association for the Advancement of Science and American Educational Research Association. In that role, he supported federal work on STEM education, workforce development, and national security for then Senator Kamala Harris, helping translate research into policy at the highest levels of government. Prior to joining USC, Dr. Davis served as the first director of STEM initiatives for the City of Philadelphia in the mayor's office, where he led a comprehensive cross-sector STEM strategy spanning K through 12 education, higher education, industry, and local government agencies. During this time, he served on the Pennsylvania Governor's STEM Advisory Council and acted as a liaison to the Obama White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, connecting local implementation with national STEM priorities. He also served as regional director of the Junior Science and Humanities Symposium of Greater Philadelphia, expanding access to high-level research opportunities and scholarships for high school students across the tri-state region. In his current role, Dr. Davis also serves as a co-investigator on a clinical trial project focused on age-related macular degeneration, where he supports equity-centered trial implementation through training, strategic advising, and research on DEI-informed clinical practices. Beyond USC, Dr. Davis provides national leadership through the Micro Nanotechnology Education Center at Pasadena City College, directing advanced technology education and workforce development initiatives. Internationally, he serves as a graduate thesis advisor in collaboration with the Center for Research and Engineering Education at the University of Cape Town, supporting global scholarship and knowledge exchange. Dr. Davis's research has been published in leading journals, including the International Journal of STEM Education, the Journal of Engineering Education, and Urban Education, alongside policy-relevant research and public scholarship with national reach. His work has been supported by major philanthropic partners and public agencies, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Walmart Foundation, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, the National Science Foundation, the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, and the U.S. Department of Defense. He holds a PhD in higher education from the University of Pennsylvania, graduate degrees in robotics engineering and law, and a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Temple University, a multidisciplinary foundation that continues to shape his approach to systems-level change. Dr. Kendrick B. Davis's leadership reminds us that innovation is most powerful when it's paired with accountability, equity, public purpose, and we are honored to welcome him to the Breaking the Silence podcast.
Thanks for having me, Makaila. I'm happy to be here.
No, thank you so much for being on. So I kind of just want to start the conversation with what first drew you to engineering, education, and policy, and how did your early academic experiences shape your commitment to equity?
That's a lot. Um, but you'll help me keep track so I'll make sure I'm answering your question. Um, Early experiences that shape engineering, it's often that I look back and realize like retrospectively, like, oh yeah, that summer camp that I did or this experience that I did, really helped shape that direction. I leaned into like math and science. I think just from an earlier age, but when I got to high school, where you start having to pick and choose, like, all right, am I serious about this? Am I going to college? I decided to at least, you know, see if I was serious about it, like give myself the option to do it. And so I lived, Philly's like my second home. I lived for 13 years, but I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Same state. Most people in Philly feel like Pittsburgh is in a different state, but we're in the same state. Different cultures, but same state. Um, and so I went to a public high school, but it was a math and science magnet. And so in high school, I got the chance to take all the way up to calculus two. It kicked my butt. It was hard, but it really gave me a sense of like, hey, if you're really going to do this at a high level, like this is what you need to be prepared to do more of. And to be completely honest, I picked engineering because I thought I was into math and science, but I thought just going like the pure math route was a little boring. I didn't really know what to expect from that. Engineering felt a little cooler, so I was like, oh, I'll just go with that. Um, and when I got to Temple, I've gone through four college degree programs. I honestly think my undergrad in engineering was probably the toughest because of the gap between like where I was coming from and what was required for me to be successful, like in the college environment. But took a lot of grit, took a lot of hard work, tap into my networks. Um, it was important for me to finish it. Like there was lots of times my original plan was to go to law school right after undergrad. And so I questioned a lot of times, like, do I really need to go through all this? Do I really need to like finish this out? But I'm glad that I did because it set a foundation. I taught myself, that I could do it. Every experience that doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and so there are definitely things that it built inside of me. And while I was at Temple, I was also a teaching assistant in the math department, and so I got to see firsthand students who were like high flyers, better than me in math, and students who were really, really struggling with like basic concepts. And I think that was when I started to think about like, what does this math preparation look like before college? Because I would had the opportunity to work with students who were struggling to remember that a triangle had three sides. And that's not an exaggeration. And so it really had me thinking, and these were not, we were in Philadelphia at Temple, but these were students from all over the country.
Mm.
And so it really got me thinking about like, like, there are clearly some issues in math preparation. Like, what does that look like? My, and I'll say this very quickly. My first job at a Temple I was a substitute teacher at a charter school. And I pretty much, like, I cover all kind of courses like music, math, science from first grade to 12th grade. And I saw the same thing, this like critical mass of folks or students who didn't have the math skills to be proficient, not just in like passing a test or a placement test or a class, but just like how do you get the right change back when you go to the store? How do you make sure that you're signing, loan documents for a house or a car or a student loan that are not disadvantaging you like for the future? And so that really started me on my path to like, hey, there's something here. I think there's something I want to explore.
No, I love that, especially when you said that you noticed that there were some students that didn't remember that a triangle had three sides. So you've seen that
Yeah.
there was a gap in learning and you wanted to be the one to bridge that gap. Um, so also too, like at what point did you realize that your work it needed to move beyond research and into systems level leadership and policy impact?
It's interesting. It was actually the opposite for me, right? So like I got into research from the systems level impact. And partly to well, I'll start with the systems level impact. Those earlier experiences, like in the education space, again, got me thinking like there must be something here. How do I explore this more meaningfully? How do I explore this more deeply? And so that took me to I was exploring my senior year at Temple. I applied to I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, so I applied to a few different things. And I got accepted to an aerospace engineering program at Washington University in St. Louis. I was like, all right, great. Boom, that'll be my plan. I move out there. And over the course of like 2 weeks in the summer after graduation, I just like completely lost interest. It just like drained. I was like, I don't think this is what I want to do. And I ended up, make a long story short, I was just still considering different options. And I ended up talking to one of my brother's friends who was in education. He was like, hey, I think you'd be a good fit at this charter school. And so I literally just got dressed, printed out a resume, caught the train down the street, and just walked in the door and
Mm.
was like, hey, this is who I am. I think it was like 2 weeks before school was supposed to start. I was like, this is who I am. This is my resume. Would love the opportunity to talk about, working here. The I just happened to walk in while the head of the school was at the front. She grabbed my resume. We went to the office. We spoke for like 10 minutes and she hired me. And it was like it was like the brokest I ever was in my professional journey. But just like being in the school every day, just like interacting with the students, like feeling like there was something that I could really contribute to the space. And so while I was at that school, I ended up starting an after school robotics club. I went to, I got connected with um, a woman at the district who was running robotics clubs. She invited me to be a part of it. I was like, great, I'll start at the school. I went to this 2 day professional development at Villanova High School. We um, put together and did these like underwater robots and did it, took it back to the school. She ended up actually recruiting me away from that school into the school district to do it district wide. And so like a couple weeks later, I was like doing teacher professional development. I was like ordering supplies and putting robots together and teaching other people how to do it. And that in terms of like the system impact, that eventually led me to like, oh, there are schools in this city that don't have the same access to like math and science. Like you know that. Like I knew that back in Pittsburgh, but it's different when you're seeing it play out in real time. And so for I'll give a quick example. I used to work with schools to bring these like interactive science presentations, particularly like schools in like the low income neighborhoods where they may not have like qualified teachers to teach these subjects. And I'll never forget, I was in an auditorium. There was a guy on the stage on these science presentations, and I heard the kids talking. They were like, "It's so cool, blah blah blah." And I just kind of heard a little bit of the conversation, and I turned to them and I said, "Hey, what's your favorite subject in science?" Because I was the STEM director for the district. So I was like, if there are things they know they like, maybe I can try to do more of that. So I said, "Hey, what's your favorite subject?" And they were like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Look, what's your favorite subject in science? Like, what do you like to learn about?" And they're like, "Mister, we don't have science." And I was like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "We don't have science class." And so, of course, I was taken aback. That conversation let me have a conversation with a teacher and principal, and it was just you only have so many bodies in the school. You only have so many people qualified, or you can recruit. You may not have a teacher for that class. And when it comes down to it, and you're reshuffling personnel, those are typically the classes that go without, quality instruction. And so that the school district eventually led me to the district at the time was going through this like massive budget cuts, and a lot of in fact, the woman who recruited me away, she was cut or was transitioned out of her position. And so I was like unplanned, like in charge of robotics and STEM programs for the district, and went through a lot of conversations with teachers and principals about like what could or couldn't continue. But long story short, I decided like there was a lot happening people didn't know about, and there was a lot that needed to be celebrated. So me and a colleague created a STEM Awareness Week for the school district. And it was really just an opportunity to celebrate what was happening. We invited like engineering deans from all the local colleges and universities to come talk to students about what do you need to do to be competitive and be prepared for engineering program, in a local university. There's also a thing of like, you want people to graduate and stay in the area. Tax dollars stay there, the sort of social cohesion, like all that. And so we did a series of events over the week. And I'll never forget one of the events, I think it was the engineering dean's luncheon. The mayor's higher education advisor was there, and she said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something." I was like running around, didn't have a lot of time, and she pulled me aside for a second. She was like, "Have you considered doing this at a higher level?"
Hmm.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "We have a position open, and the mayor needs to like appoint somebody. I think you should show interest, or I think you should like look into it and see if you're interested." I was on my way to a STEM competition in Portland, Oregon called the Mesa Math Engineering Science Achievement. Um, on my way to a competition with some students from Lincoln High School. Went to the competition and I was like, this is like really cool. I love this. I love doing it. But I think I might want to do it at a higher level, or at least want to explore like what that looks like. And I submitted my application. One thing led to another. And I'll never forget, I was walking my last interview. I didn't know it was gonna be my last interview. I was walking out of City Hall, and this like older black woman, she came to me. She said, "You look like you work here." She said, "Can you tell me how to get to X, Y, Z?" And I was like, honestly, I was like, "Ma'am, I have no idea like how to get any." I was like, "I don't even work here." And she's like, "Well, you look like you do." And I went back up to where I remember later that afternoon, I got a phone call
Hmm.
that I got the job. And that position, I'll just say very quickly, the position at the mayor's office, it was like very open, very like you could kind of like sky's the limit. If you figure out somebody to pay for it, like you could do it. And it really allowed me to the access, the latitude, the resources to say like, hey, if I was serious about trying to make changes in these areas, I was serious about, trying to increase the number of Black and Brown students and low income students to have opportunities in the areas, now's the time to do it. And it was a pretty amazing ride. But that was part of that systems work that led me to like, I need to better understand this from like a scholar's perspective. Kind of led me to my PhD program. Wanted to understand how the conditions in Philadelphia were like help improved or hindered by what's happening at the federal level. That kind of led me to the Senate. So like wanting to understand systems kind of took me in the research direction.
No, I love that. And also, I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit more too. So, your work it sits at the intersection of STEM education, workforce development, and equity. So, what does equitable STEM access truly mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent question. One of the, because like equity is a bad word now. We, we've been developing other concepts and phrases to get at the same thing. And one of the ones I've come across, and I don't necessarily believe in replacing equity, but I do think you need to communicate things to different audiences in a way that they best receive it. And so one of the terms I've come across is undifferentiated outcomes,
Mm.
right? So like pushing for equity is in some ways pushing for undifferentiated outcomes. So no matter where you came from, your background, the level of experience you've had, that you should have access to a pathway, a set of tools, a set of resources, and a set of people and support system where if that's what you choose, you want to be an astronaut, you want to, go and explore the poets, you want to, whatever you want to do, that um, there's undifferentiated outcomes, across the board, that students in Cheltenham High School can have the same, college going opportunities and rates as students in literally right across the street, in Northeast or Northwest Philly. So I think it looks a lot of different ways, right? And I think it depends on, um, sometimes it depends on location, sometimes it depends on like sort of the level of education you're talking about. The That marriage between education and workforce is really just where in the pipeline are you, right? Are we at the place where we need to improve education, opportunities, or at the place where we need to begin to transition that to like jobs? One of the most interesting things I've experienced over the last couple of years is interacting with. So like a couple of years ago, I was co-leading research and evaluation for this major DoD project called California Dreams. So the When President Biden signed the Chips and Science Act, there was like hundreds of millions of dollars that went to research and development, education in these advanced fields like AI, semiconductor technologies, biotechnology, you name it. And one of those areas is microelectronics. Microelectronics are things that, I mean, they interface with like military and weapon system, but micro nanotechnologies have to do with like all of our devices, our computers, our tablets, right? All these the advanced chips that are needed to run our devices, right? Those are created in nanofab labs. So that there was the California Dreams was about like the research and development and building the educational infrastructure to do that. And I hosted a half a day meeting with the Department of Defense program officer, pretty much the people in charge of our funding, to came to campus, and we had a lot of outcomes to talk about. But the thing they were most interested in was jobs.
Mm.
They wanted to know how many people did you put into jobs. And I'm talking about this was a course over a course of like 6 weeks. So there's like this acceleration toward getting people into these fields and figuring out what this looks like. And so I say that to say the STEM education and workforce being married is also a part of bridging that equity gap, right? Making sure you're not just giving students these like one-off, cosmetic, programmatic things that cannot lead to skills that give them a better life. Um, and so pushing for undifferentiated outcomes, um, giving people like real and serious and constructive opportunities, I think is how we start bridging the equity gaps. Because the truth of the matter is, I would have answered that question differently, years ago. My understanding and of the issues has changed and broadened. And part of me going back to schools, not that I couldn't learn things outside of going to a PhD program, but part of my process and my research like helped me understand that there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to equity. It's not a silver bullet. It's not even a couple of levers. It is literally transforming and shifting multiple systems at the same time in directions that they don't want to go. You can't talk about education without talking about social services. You can't talk about social services without talking about the criminal legal system. You can't talk about the criminal legal system without talking about the economic system. You can't talk about these conversations in isolation, but it's rare that people have the expertise and experience to like bridge those gaps. And so because I've been, blessed with the opportunity to be in formal settings, informal settings, like that's the work that I put my hands to do.
No, I love that. And kind of wanted to touch and tie into what role does public scholarship play into shifting how institutions and policymakers understand STEM education?
That's a beautiful question. The as a professor, I'm compelled to write produce scholarship, and in particular peer-reviewed scholarship, right? And just for the sake of the audience, right? It's article research, original research articles or papers that you're writing that you're pitching to a journal to get placed. That's wonderful in theory, but the reality of it is uh, about on average 6 or 7 people read journal articles
Mm,
in total. Most people never read them front to back. In fact, even us as scholars, faculty, when we're writing things, we don't have time or capacity to be digging through, the excruciating details of we're cherry picking. Does this, I'm reading the abstract. Is it interesting? Okay, what methods are they using? What are their findings? We're cherry picking. And so one of the, one of the things that, as 6 or 7 people on average read the full articles. So there's a lot of time and effort and energy that goes into very little dissemination,
mm,
right? And I don't particularly whether I'm trained as a researcher or not. That's an upside down cone to me. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Right? You get a whole bunch of time, energy, effort. It goes into like little output. And if the idea is that we're producing words, we're producing documents for people to read, then we need to produce it in a way that's accessible and compelling for people to read. And most of the time, it's not how we write. It's not most of the things we write. We have to transition that to some form of like public scholarship. Um, Public scholarship has become more and more important to me because it's like people use language as an exclusionary tool, purposely stringing words together to block people's understanding. And that's happened since the beginning of time. And so sometimes it feels like when you're at a university or when you have access to like a library site, like it almost feels like you have the keys to the kingdom or like you have some kind of, secret key to the vault because there's so much useful information that could be used. There's so much critical information that could be useful to other people if they had that translation.
mm.
And most times people don't have right, unless you have that specific training, you're not doing a lot of translation, or it's just not in a form that really makes sense for you to do. Right. Me as a faculty member, when I need to know information, I don't go to a journal article. I go to Google. When I need to, figure out something, like I'm calling somebody. We're not even using a lot of times the channels of, if I have to cite something, obviously, but in terms of just becoming conversant in something, deciding whether I'm going to pursue something, or even speaking publicly about something. I may not reference any peer-reviewed things at all. So I think if you really care about not just being smart, but making sure information gets to the right people. I think public scholarship has to be a part of your repertoire. It has to be something that you at least, develop an appetite for doing because if you really believe in what you're doing, you want it to get out to as many people as possible.
Mm.
And so you got to know how to do it in different forms.
I agree with that. And I also kind of wanted to touch on that too. So, as you're the professor of research and co-director of the USC STEM Center, how do you navigate leading within large institutions while pushing for systematic change?
That's difficult. That's difficult. I think I've given up on the idea that I'm of the mindset that the master's tools will never be sufficient to dismantle the master's house.
Mm,
And so I'm not of the mindset that like we're doing some great transformative work in academia.
mm,
I'm not. And in fact, if you're working at a school of medicine or doing some like, you're doing basic science research and you are like cracking the code on like decades of things that were wrong about, I'm not saying there's nothing great happening, but a large majority of the things happening, like we could do without.
mm.
Like if they went away tomorrow, nothing would fundamentally or functionally change about how most people operate. Like I'm not advocating, like obviously jobs would be lost, so I'm not advocating for that. But I'm saying there are a lot of things happening that just really the institution is set up in a way where you either play along or you phase out,
Mm.
right? And because you as an individual, and I'm supposed to talk about my mindset, you as an individual are going to burn yourself out trying to turn this large ship faster than what it is designed to move. And people do it all the time. They spend a lifetime doing it. That's just not my cup of tea. And so my perspective is really not how do I take the master's tools to this master's house, but how do I learn this skill of tool building?
Mm.
How do I learn this skill of developing and building? Because I will say, for example, I would never go work in the U.S. Senate and claim that I was transforming some like. That's just not what an individual staffer is going to do. That's not what any individual elected member of Congress is going to do. But can you learn things that make you more of an effective person? You're an effective member of your community, an effective professional, so on and so forth. Absolutely. And beyond any job I have, beyond whose payroll I'm on, I have I have a mission and a ministry that is above, any particular organization. So wherever I am, wherever I'm doing, I'm looking to understand how we can use these systems to better affect the people that they should be serving, that they're not quite serving. But I'm certainly interested in understanding how to improve the conditions um, for Black people.
I agree. And then, especially when you touched on improving conditions, and to tie into that, you founded the USC Critical Policy Collective to support student engagement in policy. What gap were you hoping to fill with that?
The sort of the gap that we spoke about a couple of minutes ago, right? Like, how do we get this critical information and perspective from people's heads in these ivory towers into actionable things that can change people's lives, right? And I worked in government, so I understand and appreciate both perspectives. Yeah, I will say when I worked in government generally, but in particular in the Senate, is probably one of the most talented group of individuals I ever like worked with. Like in terms of professionalism, in terms of like just speed and efficiency, just knowledge and know-how of a topic. And aside from that, just the way the Senate's set up, you have so many resources at your disposal. I could literally call up a lawyer and say, like, hey, I'm trying to amend the Higher Education Act to like uh, get some more student loan repayment options. What does that look like? What bill do I amend? I could call up a congressional research services and say, hey, can you run down a list of the workforce development changes that have been made in the Workforce Opportunity Act over the last 20 years and like send it to me like this afternoon, tomorrow? You you could do that. There are a lot of resources at your disposal. Um, and so hold on, I forget what question did you ask me? I want to make sure I'm answering the question.
No, you're answering it. So it was about how you founded the USC Critical Policy Collective to support student engagement in policy, and what gap were you hoping to fill
Oh
with?
yes, yes, bridging the gap. That there were a lot of I was saying that the Senate was a wonderful experience. There were a lot of talented people. Um, but I want to make sure I say this the right way. I don't get myself in trouble. Uh, I work with a lot of talented people, but the Congress and the Senate itself is not diverse at all. There are very few Black and brown people. Obviously, in leadership, those who are in leadership typically hire people to look like them. That's across the board, right? Any corporation, any organization, you typically the leadership hires leaders who look like them, or they hire staff who look like them, or they hire leaders who also hire staff that look like them. So they're not surprising. There's not a lot of Black and brown people on the Hill, and because of that, we are structurally locked out of a lot of critical information and access. There are people who can just call up your senator, right? Calling up your senator and calling your senator's office are two different things.
Hmm.
We used to have weekly meetings where we went through like the number of phone calls we got. We get something like 200,000 calls uh, with both in the state office and in the federal office. And we go through like, oh, such people called for this. These people called about wildfires. These people called about, loan relief. And those were just messages. We rarely ever answered the phone because it's too much. It's overwhelming. You can't even establish a process for like processing that much. So people leave messages or you have quick calls. There are people who can just call up their actual member
Mm.
and say, hey, I know there's a vote coming up on this. I need you to look out for this, or we need to make sure this amendment gets in, or, X, Y, and Z. There's access and then there's access. And a lot of times that access is mediated by whether you know who to talk to, but more importantly, how to talk to them, what language to use, right? You want to talk to a member, you have a education issue you want to get across, you probably need to find the staffer first. And a lot of people spend a lot of time like, oh, they're not responding to my email, blah, blah, blah. I tried talking to this event. You need to talk to the person who's actually doing the work. So there are a lot of sort of like tricks of the trade, language, just things that we have access to that we could learn and adapt to materially change the educational and other conditions. And so I felt like for students who are in these like advanced programs, you have interest in policy. You might even know what policy is, but you have interest in changing and amending the structures, right? That people have to interact with. The social, the educational, economic, that's policy. Now, the question is, do you have the specific training to know the language, to know the process, to know the who, the what, the where, the when, the how? And that is, I think that's the bridge I was trying to get. How do you bridge your interest and your theoretical knowledge with your interest in building and helping community and the specific tools you'll need to accomplish that?
No, I love that. And I also wanted to kind of touch on too. So, what have you learned about leadership by mentoring students who want to challenge, not just navigate exiting systems?
Mm. What lessons have I learned in leadership for work with students who want to challenge, not just, you said exit systems, right?
Existing systems.
Existing systems on leadership. Hmm. I think what I'll say about leadership is that it often feels in real time different than how you envisioned it.
Mm,
And when you think about, I think the things that I've been most effective in leading are things that I'm most passionate about,
mm.
right? Where the intersection of my passion, my interest, and my capacity uh, really fit well together. Um, and so I think what I've learned about leadership, and honestly, what I encourage students to do is boundary setting has actually helped me to be a better leader because knowing myself, my capacities, what I have to give, just because I know something doesn't mean I have the energy to teach it today. Just because you have the capacity to do something, or just because you have the knowledge or the tool to do something, doesn't mean that you have the time necessarily to do it today. So I think understanding myself, um, setting clear boundaries around what it is that you're interested in, what it is you're not interested in, right? Because the more skills you develop, the more networks and spaces you're exposed to, the more opportunities you're going to have to do things you want to do, but also the more opportunities you're going to have to be distracted by things that are related, but that you don't want to do. And so there's that balance of like, how do you explore things that are of interest, but also not tap yourself out with things that are really not like in your wheelhouse. So I think boundary setting and communicating those boundaries has been important. And like clearly communicating your interests and what you I think a lot of times it's clear of like what it's easy and we're compelled to ask like what do you want to do and like what do you want to see. But I think it's also good to communicate like what you don't want to do, like what you don't want to see, or the type of lifestyle or professional environment that you want to stay away from or that like best serves you. um I have been when you first asked the question about leadership, the knee-jerk thing that popped in my mind was like academia is probably the place where I've been most disappointed by leadership, just
Mm.
more broadly, right? I've never seen a place where, like I said in the Senate, I think one of the things that thought about in government was how you have to do a lot. You serve the public with a fraction of the resources and time that you need to do it effectively. Like you always need more time and you always need more resources. in academia, I've never seen such resources, talent, and capacity packed into one place that's so ineffectively used.
Mm.
Right? Like it's almost like the engineer in me. Like you're building a thermodynamic system, you're building an engine. Like you want to build as much efficiency so you don't lose heat. And it's like one of the most inefficient operations I have ever seen. Literally one of the most inefficient operations I've ever seen across. It's just designed to be that way, right? It's designed not to be cost efficient. It's designed to not pivot quickly to to go with the changing times. It's designed so the design itself. And sometimes when we're trying to figure out what's wrong with the system, look at its design, right? It's like you're wondering why your car can't climb a wall. Like it's not designed to do that, right? You're wondering why fish can't climb a tree. Well, it's not designed to do that. And so I'll kind of wrap it up by saying the question of like leadership, but also like how do you push for change in these like kind of because I do believe in going to the side of the injustice, but I also believe in you being real about what you as an individual can do. And it's less about what you can do, but where you are best suited to push for transformation. Because there's some people like they have the tolerance and the gift to do something for a certain amount of time, a certain place. That may be you, that may not be you. And so really knowing yourself, I think, sets you up um, for the most success.
I love that. And I think also tying back to some of what you talked about earlier, those earlier experiences in your career, when folks seen you and they wanted to bring you into those spaces. And I think you also said you did the 2-day professional development training, and that opportunity then
Hmm.
shifted for you having a bigger role within the school district. Um,
Yeah,
so also like touching on like how sponsorship is really important, bringing folks into the room, not just telling them about what's behind that door, but bringing
right.
them to that next level. I talk about that on every single podcast. The difference between mentorship and sponsorship, probably
Hmm.
my own experiences, but yeah, it's really important. Um, bringing folks and seeing that and ensuring that we can, just share the knowledge. So.
Absolutely.
But also, like I wanted to touch on too, so your involvement in equity-centered clinical trial implementation is very powerful. So why is DEI, which we're not really using that term much
Mhm.
at all anymore,
Right,
but
right.
critical in medical research and clinical settings?
You're saying why is DI important?
Yeah, critical in medical research and clinical settings.
Yeah, uh, that's a really good question, and I think there's a lot of different directions to go. I'll touch on a couple. Whenever we do any human subject research, even if you're like going to interview people about their experience in college, we have to go through institutional review board approval, right? The whole point of IRB approval is to protect people, right, against things doing things against their consent or doing things they don't understand. That is tied directly to a long and storied history of white experimentation on black bodies, right? And so there's an aspect of it that is kind of baked into it. There's almost like DEI baked into anytime you have to do institutional review board because you're doing it for that reason. You're doing it to protect the most vulnerable who throughout history have not been. Um, and the clinical trials process in implementing DEI is, a step toward or an attempt at bridging those trust gaps, right? You probably heard the same things. I'm growing up, in a black household. It's a lot to go to the doctor sometimes. Whether it's an individual choice, whether it's like pressure you're getting from parents to go or not to go, whether it's just that you don't develop a culture of doing it because you don't see them doing it. Maybe you don't have access to health insurance. Maybe you're uninsured or underinsured. There's lots of different reasons why either the habit of going to the doctor or trust between medical professionals and um and I'll say black community in particular, but in this clinical trial, it's just it could be black, could be brown. Most of the people that suffer from these degenerative eye diseases are not black; they're actually white. But the idea of implementing this more human-centered approach—that's really what it is—to the clinical trials acknowledges the broken trust between the medical field, healthcare industry, and communities, but also allows provides a tool, puts another tool in the hands of surgeons and medical staff, right? Because they're used to, especially clinics. So this clinical trials project is in 5 different locations across the country. So two, I think three in California, one in Houston, and one in Chicago. So we've done site visits to all of them, met the surgeons, clinical staff, done professional development, and they're used to dealing with a particular clientele, right? It's a triage thing, right? You're dealing with emergencies, you need to get people in and out. Sometimes they may be low information clients, sometimes they may be bilingual, you may not have all the requisite staff to effectively communicate and serve their needs. And so it's hard sometimes to go to those people and say, hey, can you actually give a little more? Like, can you actually transform your practices to center around those people that yeah, center around those people that may not fit into your protocols, right? They may not know exactly how to get to your office. They might not have the requisite transportation to, say, come for follow-up appointments require access to transportation. Who's paying for that, right? But so if you can't pay for transportation, does that mean that you shouldn't have access to some life-saving medication? And so sometimes the DEI part is just helping, medical professionals, surgeons, those operating the clinical trials to think about things, think about accessibility issues that may be completely outside of the challenges that they face daily, weekly, or the challenges of the clients that they typically serve. So this is the first of its kind, DI integration into a clinical trials project. Dr. Mark Kumayan uh, invented this eye patch software. He's at the Keck School of Medicine. It's actually a collaboration between the it's a tech startup called RBT, the Keck School of Medicine, the Race and Equity Center, where I used to be chief research officer in the Rosso School of Education. So we're doing a lot of forming it as we go along, but it's been a really, really interesting process.
I love that. And I kind of, in addition to that, I wanted to touch on you work both nationally and internationally. So how
Mhm.
has global perspective shaped how you approach equity in US education systems?
Wow, that's an excellent question. I'll go back to STEM for this because the both the projects I worked on internationally are STEM related, and the equity example is kind of related. So I mentioned like Biden passed the Chips and Science Act, and research and development in these areas. But I mentioned the areas, but I didn't really touch in, well, what are the occupations or opportunities within those areas? And not sort of super detailed, but there are those who go to graduate school, they become like design engineers on research. There are those who may do like 4-year degrees. They're um, kind of become middle managers, project managers, but they're at that level. And then there's like technician focused degrees, which are typically the occupations that people who go to technical schools or community colleges are more competitive for. And so that community college technician level is very closely tied to the artisan community and international communities like on the continent in South Africa and Guinea and Ghana in Nigeria. Those the unemployment rate. I'll take South Africa for example. 'Cause that's where I'm currently doing graduate advising at the University of Cape Town, their Center for Research and Engineering Education. But the project I'm working on is actually a project about Uganda. So it's kind of like two different nations within the same project. And youth unemployment is high. Um, graduation rates are lagging, but they have a need for these technician focused or artisan focused careers. Who are the plumbers? Who are the sheet metal workers? Who are the textile workers? Like there's a need for that same workforce strand that is missing or is lagging in the U.S. is similar to the workforce strand that is missing or lagging on the continent. And so, before the government cuts, when I was in South Africa, I was had broached a conversation about, hey, we should go after. In fact, it was one of the first federal agencies that got cut, the USAID, the US Aid for International Development. I was like, we should go after a grant, create a plan or a project to address this workforce development from like an education and mentorship standpoint, but address this like workforce development level that is like lagging in both of our countries. And so looking for those international connections, really shows you that there's a lot more that connects us than that divides us. And there's a lot of differences, right? But it really goes to show that if we look for opportunities for cooperation, we can find them. And
Mm.
if we look for opportunities for, you know, dissension or disagreement, you'll also find those. And so I don't know where the funding is going to come from, but I really am looking forward to not just like continuing, but like developing those relationships even more.
No, I love that. And also, like tying into that, when you imagine the future of academia, what does leadership rooted in equity, accountability, and public purpose truly look like?
Leadership, these are big questions.
Yeah.
Leadership, accountability, and equity. Well, I think you'll have to remember what the other two words are. But I think when I think of leadership, I think of um, the future of leadership in academia. Um, I think of uh, leaders who are not afraid to take bold steps to make a pivot.
Hmm.
And it is an eventuality, right? It's not a theory anymore. It is an eventuality that, yeah, some of the more long-standing, well-endowed college universities will survive, but lots of college universities that you and I know and can name today will not be here 30, 40 years from now
Hmm.
because they will not be able to survive. Enrollment is down. People typically go to college. The whole stick on going to college is you go to college to get a job, to be more competitive, and so on and so forth. That still remains true. But again, that we make decisions based on money, but we also make decisions on how we feel,
Hmm.
right? It's like economics and behavioral economics. People are, it is true that enrollment is down across the board at almost every college and university. I don't think I've not heard any college and university touting their enrollment numbers. Enrollment's down. That affects, um, that affects, their revenue and their bottom line. But the the opportunity is that colleges and universities have so many existing material, personnel, and other assets that they could make these pivots. But they've got to get out of their sort of own way to do it. We've got to get out of the way of thinking, oh, it's going to be doomsday if we can no longer function and things don't look the way that we're used to them looking. And so I think leadership is like having the boldness to pivot for the survival of your institution. If you care about it, having the boldness to pivot. Um, Equity, I think, is people having access to affordable options that get them from their goal A to B,
Hmm.
right? If I'm in Utah, Lansing, Michigan, if I'm in upstate Ithaca, New York, if I'm in Maine, Florida, Texas, there should be higher education options available to me. In fact, it's one of the things that I appreciate about California. I've lived here for 6 years. I've been on the East Coast my whole life. I'm new to West Coast, still learning their culture. But California had a higher education master plan that was built on. It's broken now, but the original design was built on, yeah, we have robust community college systems, a sort of mid-tier, university system, and then our sort of top-tier flagship universities. And so regardless of where you are and where you come from and your money, there should be some kind of higher education pathway to you. So I think the future of equity in higher education is that every student can see a pathway, some kind of affordable, achievable pathway. Because the truth of the matter is, the premium on degrees, the branding matters less and less and less. As a part of technician training and undergraduate research work I do, we talk to industry folks all the time. Have industry folks come and talk to students.
Hmm.
They don't care about degrees anymore. They care about skills. Do you have and of course talking about particular fields, right? And I'm talking about, or in the areas that I've been talking about. But they care less and less about degrees because the truth of the matter is they're when you have large companies like Micron and Texas Instruments and all those big companies people want to work for, not necessarily talking about them because they're so big, they kind of get to do what they want to do. They control a lot of the market and the industry. But most people don't work for those companies.
Hmm.
Most people work for small, mid-sized companies. Most people work for them, some version of entrepreneurship. And so those are going to be the places that those are the places that are saying, listen, we need to be able to respond to market forces. And so we need to be able to train people not in 4 years, not even in 2 years, not even 18 months. We need something in 6 to 8 weeks to give you the foundational skills, because everything you really need to learn, you're gonna learn on the job anyway.
Hmm.
And what was the last thing you said? It was equity and leadership and,
Equity, accountability, and public purpose.
oh, accountability. It's interesting. I'm gonna try to make this very quick. The policy group I work with, we're meeting this week to discuss a notice of proposed rulemaking. It's essentially when a law's passed, the some federal agencies, labor, education, Department of Defense, energy, somebody oversees the implementation of that law. And so when they passed the one big beautiful bill, horrible name, right, last summer, part of that law was reforming loan systems, student loan payment options, repayment options, and student loan eligibility. And so what they student loans fall under Title IV of the Higher Education Act, which is like federal financial aid. Whenever you make changes, you have to go through what's called a notice of proposed rulemaking. And so we are, and as a part of that process, you can offer public comment. And so we're going through the process of offering public comment on, yeah, what do these proposed rules mean for uh, Black and brown folks, low income, people who are trying to get ahead. Um, One of the things they sort of the administration are trumpeting is like, we're passing this regulation to control the cost of college.
Mm.
But what they're doing, the details of the regulation is limiting people's repayment options and limiting the options they have to finance their college education. The two are misaligned. They don't work. And so I think accountability looks like colleges taking the responsibility. I think government and colleges collectively taking responsibility for the out of control cost of college education. It's out of control. They know that, but to they're going to continue to charge what they can as long as there's financing available to cover it.
Mm.
So I think accountability looks like colleges taking either ensuring that people have the tools where they can more than pay back the financing they had to take out to a tenure institution, um, or you need to be severely cutting the costs because people shouldn't be paying that much if they can't recover it. So it's in the financing thing, but I think when it comes to higher ed, accountability really looks like beginning to take a hard look at who's responsible for this and who's responsible for getting us out of it. Right. Like if I ever ran for president, I would run on like student debt, relieving student debt. The 44 million borrowers that owe more than $1.6 trillion. I'm like, I'm getting rid of it. You owe for me, it's gone.
We need that.
Right.
So also
Uh,
too, like, what advice would you give to emerging scholars who want their work to matter beyond journals and classrooms?
Learn how to resource your work,
Mm.
uh, grant writing, uh, developing relationships with program officers, learning how to spend your time differently at conferences. Um, because the fact of the matter is that sometimes the things that you're compelled to do to complete your program are not the things that are going to help you be most successful, especially in a budget constrained environment that we're in. Right? Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is stable. Even tenure track positions, even tenure track positions, or just staples of the institution that people learn rely on. Nothing is stable. And so I would say if you really want to keep some momentum in your work and your interest in doing it professionally, learn how to research your work. Sign up for a grant. It could be YouTube. Sign up for a grant writing workshop. Research and understand and know the philanthropic partners in your area. You're in Philadelphia, the philanthropy network of Greater Philadelphia. Know those people. Look up the city office, the mayor's office of grants. There's one in Philadelphia. I imagine there might be a corollary in Chester. But start getting to know the philanthropic like community in your area. And I would say learn to build community with people, not necessarily that are like-minded, but like-hearted.
Mm.
Because I have a lot of like-minded colleagues who I don't want to work with because they don't know how to do nothing. Right? Like it's just too much work to get them to translate like thinking into doing. But I find when you work with like-hearted people, it's like the the doing I think gets a little more manageable. I don't need to agree with you, but I do need to agree, like our work ethic needs to agree. Because ultimately at the end of the day, like we're trying to get something yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, we're trying to get something done. So I would say learn to resource your work because you don't do research for free. You don't live for free.
Mm.
And these institutions they cannot promise you something they don't have. And right now they don't have.
That is true. And they don't. And something is very important. Signing up for, like you said, any grant that you may see, it might be a mini grant or a fellowship. Fellowship
Yep,
programs are really good that can kind of, get you into the field if you're emerging scholar and networking.
absolutely. And sign up for everything.
Right.
Right. Like I taught around a technical training program a couple years ago. We would like tell them like, oh, pick your top three or four and go after those and focus on them. Now apply for. I said, if you see it come across your desk, you apply for it because the competition is so fierce
Mm.
because the resources are so strained. I was yeah, apply for everything. Like sign up, go to the meeting, go to the interesting. Like most of all, do the things that scare you. If you don't even remember my name, do the things that scare you because those are where the meaningful learning opportunities are going to come. Failure is the best teacher. It hurts, but it's the best teacher if you do something with it. But yeah, go out there, learn to research your work, go like dive into those skills. Like you'll notice that your colleagues or people that you work with or people in your networks, they kind of center around a certain group of things. Go outside of that.
Mm.
And it doesn't mean being better or different than them, but it means like you have a specific mission, you have specific passion, and nobody is going to pursue that like you. It's not you're no one else is going to feel the burden. And I understand, sometimes you're like, I really feel strongly about something, and you want somebody to come along. Like you're like waiting for them to like get the same thing. It might have been your podcast, might have been a company. It's like you're waiting for them to get the same excitement. You realize, like, oh, no, this is for me.
Mm.
This is my burden. This is for me to do. And so, like recognizing when it's something to do as a group or when you do it, when it's like something you just need to pioneer. Because sometimes, and with this, people tell you it can't be done until you do it.
Mm. No, I love that. And also signing up for everything. Apply
Everything.
for everything. People be like, okay, are you doing this and you're doing that and here and there? And I'm like, I
Yeah.
apply for everything. If I see it pop up on my LinkedIn, because I'm always on
Yep.
LinkedIn, I'm like, okay, grant or this fellowship program, and I'll just do it. Even
Yep.
with I'll shout out one organization, the Student National Medical Association. I started with them probably a year or so ago, almost 2 years.
Okay.
And I've done two leadership programs with them, two
Mm.
fellowships. And then that translated into I applied for another fellowship that they had after that. Those two that I
I
did were
know
not
that's
paid.
right.
Yeah, and those two I did them at the same time. They were not paid. Um,
Mm.
but then I applied for another one last year and I got it, and that one was. So I was able to do
Yeah.
research that I'm currently doing now. But that just goes to say, like, there might be opportunities that you might not get payment for, but
Yep.
there's some type of experience that you're gaining from that, and you never know where that will lead to with that organization. So you just have to
And the
kind
only other thing I would add is like, please apply for things that you're not qualified for.
of,
Like, please, for the like, please apply for the thing where there's 15 qualifications and you only hit like eight of them. Apply anyway. Do it. Yep. Apply anyway. Because ultimately, the people who are choosing are humans,
mm,
and humans don't always follow rules. Like we like what we like. We things catch our eye or interest, and we go with it. It's like please apply to things that you're not qualified for because you don't need. Sometimes a hiring manager don't even know the qualification on the paper. Right, it's being screened out by somebody else. Like go ahead, just apply for that thing. And
no,
absolutely, I 100% piggyback on what you just said. Find value in opportunities beyond the money. Because at the end of the day, when you find the thing that works for you that's clicking, the money will. Now we've all have had cash flow issues. Somebody, if you haven't had cash flow, like please hit me up. Let me know your secret. Like we've all had cash flow issues, but it matters when you're doing something that is meaningful to you. Not so much that like you can eat passion, like you can't pay your rent on passion, uh, but you can do something effectively and sustainably unless you're really into it and there's a motivation beyond just like the value that everybody goes for things. I could never have done half of the things that like people approach me or that next step or next job or whatever. It was because I was already doing it.
mm,
Right. Like I created STEM Awareness Week to kind of broaden the scope of what we were doing beyond the district. And that's what got the attention of the higher education person. Right. Like I when I was in the mayor's office, I was the city liaison to the White House office. I created that because I pursued it. I went to, speaking of going to meetings, I went to a meeting. One conversation led to another. I was kind of a city point person. And I literally asked someone there, I was like, we should call me something. I was like, how do I talk about my work like that we're doing together? And so it's just like, yeah, do the things that scare you. Do the things that like people just don't do or are afraid to do.
No, I love that. And I also kind of wanted to tie into what continues to give you hope as you navigate academia, policy, and innovation spaces.
Black scholars,
Mm.
Black scholars, uh, people who continue to defy the odds to be. If you're Black doing scholarship research, but particularly if you're in a graduate program, PhD program, you are specifically in a space that is not designed for you to be.
Mm.
Literally in a space that's not designed for you to be. You doing that like medical research internship, you're literally in a space that's not designed for you to be. And so I think I'm currently in the like academia kind of it's from the scholarship standpoint. So I'm saying scholarship, but I'm really saying like it's Black folk who still have some kind of commitment and capacity for uplift of our community and materially improving our lived conditions. Because the truth of the matter is, ain't nobody gonna do it with us. That is the absolute truth of the matter. Is ain't nobody gonna do it with us. And we say that, but what if we really think and process that, it forces us and compels us to like do more. I don't mean do more for other people. I'm talking about like get yourself together. Like what things do I need to work on, right, to be more effective person, a professional, a man, a woman, a community member, a member of my organization, like whatever it is. It's like what gives me hope is that there still seems to be a critical mass of folks committed to um, not just community uplift, but I mentioned the academia thing, but specifically exploring avenues and places that people don't want them to be and are not designed for them.
No, I love that. And I kind of now just kind of wanted to give you the opportunity. How can folks still be able to stay connected to the work that you do?
Excellent question. I don't know all about like URLs and stuff, but like I'm on LinkedIn, on IG, on Facebook. It's just my name. I think IG is like Kendrick B. Davis. So I'm pretty easy to find. My faculty page out on the USC site. I usually post things, at least like major professional things on like LinkedIn or social networks. So uh, I don't post often, but at least I'll throw a few things up there every once in a while. So yeah, social media, and just kind of keep your eyes and ears open. I'm always doing something interesting. Love to share, and whenever I can get some money from a foundation or a corporation to like re-grant to communities, yeah, you'll probably definitely hear from me.
So, guys, please, please, please connect with him. He is doing amazing work. Every time I see him, like, he is so busy working,
Appreciate that.
doing the work for the community, and it's important. Representation matters. So I just kind of wanted to take the time to say, Dr. Davis, thank you so much for your scholarship, your public service, and your commitment to building systems that work, not just for a few, but for many. Your leadership reminds us that equity is not an add-on to innovation, but it's the foundation of progress. And to our listeners, if today's conversation challenged you, how you think about leadership, education, or policy, stay connected with Breaking the Silence and Angels Protection Inc. as we continue elevating voices that transform systems from the inside out. And always remember, silence protects systems, not people. So let's keep breaking it together. And like, comment, and subscribe. Take care, guys. Bye.
Thanks for